Okay, so if you're watching this, I'm guessing you're into 3D fashion design. Maybe you are a beginner, maybe you are more experienced, but I'm pretty sure you're going to find something valuable in this video either way. These are my favorite 3D design resources that I use every day in my job as a pattern maker and 3D designer, and they have helped me improve the quality of my work, so I hope they can do the same for you. And even though my main software is CLO3D, I'm pretty sure that most of these resources I'm going to share work just as well for Browzwear and Style3D. So get comfortable because I think this is going to be quite a lengthy video, and let's get started. I'm going to start with fabrics because two of the main obstacles that we face as 3D designers and pattern makers are getting accurate fabrics and also accurate avatars. Why are these two things that important? Because if we want to create 3D simulations in order to test the fit of our patterns and then create physical garments based on that pattern, then we need avatars with the correct measurements, the correct proportions, and also fabrics that have the same physical properties as fabrics in the real world that we are going to use for that physical garment that we want to get in the end. That's why I'm going to start first with the places where I go when I want to get fabrics with good physical properties, but I have also included some other places where you can get fabric textures that even if they don't include the physical properties, they can be useful if you are not as concerned about the accuracy of how a fabric behaves, and also you can always change the physical properties of a fabric if you are within CLO. I'm sure you all know this by now, but CLO3D has a website with a marketplace that is called Closet, and you can find there all kinds of 3D assets including avatars, trims, objects, and of course fabrics. The good thing about this is that most of these assets are free, and a lot of these fabrics have physical properties because there are some fabric manufacturers and suppliers that have digitized some of their fabrics and have them brought into Closet, including their physical properties. So they are going to behave in 3D as close as possible as they would behave in real life. Because of the ease of use and because you can access Closet without even leaving CLO because they are connected within the program, this is probably my favorite place to find fabrics if I need something quick and easy. Vmod is a website with an extensive library of fabrics, and all of them come with physical properties. They are not free, but they are very affordable. I think they are all around $6 or something, and there's also a subscription service if you need a lot of fabrics per month. What I really like about Vmod, aside that the fabrics all come with physical properties, is that you can find fabrics that are sometimes difficult to find elsewhere, like interesting textures with jacquards or embroideries or lace, and when you bring those fabrics into 3D, the visual quality is amazing. You can download the fabric files in several formats according to your chosen 3D software. For CLO, you can download the substamp file, but I do find that if you download that file, it doesn't work as well within the program. The render doesn't look as realistic, so I always prefer to use the native CLO fabric format. And what is interesting about these fabrics is that most of them are digital twins of real fabrics that are sold by Swatch On, that is an online fabric supplier. So you can work with your fabric in 3D, and you can also buy that same fabric and create your final garment with that, and they are supposed to behave in an identical way. Cottonworks is also a fabric manufacturer, and they have created a digital library of fabrics specifically for cotton fabrics. So you can find a lot of interesting textures, especially for knits, but also other kinds of fabrics like denim, and the best part is that all of them come with physical properties and they are free. And now I'm going to share some websites where you can find fabric textures, but in this case they don't come with physical properties. But still, I think you can get some good textures here. The first is ArtStation, and ArtStation is actually an artist community, but some of those artists have assets for sale. That includes all kinds of 3D assets, but also textures. There are some interesting fabrics that you can find here that are a bit more unusual and will work well for you if you are interested in doing a bit more like creative designs in CLO, or if you want to use CLO for video game design, for example. But I would advise you to make sure that the fabric file that you're going to download would work in CLO, because sometimes they are going to download in formats that are not compatible with this software. It's a bit of a hit and miss, and the website itself can be difficult to navigate, but it can be a good option if you are looking for more of those creative textures and materials. These two, Polygon and Quixel, are very similar. They are both websites with an extensive catalog of 3D assets, like textures, all kinds of props, HDRIs, and things like that. The fabric textures that you're going to find here don't come with physical properties, but there are some interesting designs. And of course, if you want to make your renders a bit more interesting, you can download any of their other 3D assets and add them to your scene. Because who doesn't want a bunch of grapes or the cranium of an evil goat? And if you really need to work with a particular fabric that has specific fabric properties that imitate a real-world fabric, then there are companies like Visu that can professionally scan your fabric, not only your fabric texture, but also they can measure the physical properties of your fabric and translate them into the 3D world. So they can give you an exact digital twin of your physical fabric. That comes as a cost, and I think it's a very hefty cost, but I do believe this can be a good option if you have very particular requirements. I haven't tried this option myself, so I cannot speak from experience, but I've heard good things of this company in particular, and that's why I have included it in this guide. And my advice, if you don't find the perfect fabric, would be to try to choose a fabric within CLO or CLO set that has the same structure. So if you're looking for a cotton poplin, try to look for a fabric that has that structure within CLO and also a similar composition. So if you want a swimwear lycra blend, go for a fabric that has a similar percentage of lycra within CLO and test it to see if it behaves in 3D in more or less the same way as it would behave in the real world. Because probably you already know that you can scan a fabric with your regular scanner or just take a picture of it and use that as the texture for your fabric, but then you can add whatever physical properties you need to any particular fabric in CLO. Finding avatars with the correct proportions for fitting is the bane of my existence, but thankfully the default CLO avatars have gotten much better in that respect, but also there are some other companies that have come to the rescue with more fit-focused avatars. And if you don't care that much about fitting in CLO and what you want is a nice looking avatar that looks realistic and can be animated in a render, I've also included other options for that. I'm going to mention these two together because they are very similar. Both Albanon and Figure Forms are companies that specialize in physical dress forms, and in later years they have been digitizing their collection and bringing it into the 3D space in the form of avatars that replicate the proportions and measurements of their physical counterparts. I haven't tried Figure Forms much, but I have tried extensively Albanon avatars, and I actually have a video talking about that, and I'm going to leave the link in the description somewhere. But the TLDR of that is that I really like Albanon avatars for fitting. They are not perfect, they lack a lot of customization options, but if you're working for a brand that uses standard size dress forms and fitting models, then you're going to find that probably Albanon is going to have an avatar for you. The bad thing about Albanon and Figure Form avatars is that they come with a price tag, and in the case of Albanon, it's not a cheap price tag. They do have a subscription option for freelancers that it's relatively affordable, but I think this kind of avatars only makes sense if you are really worried about the fit. If you're not that interested in that aspect, then I think you will be better off with the default CLO avatars or with some of the other options I'm going to share next. If you're you're not that worried about fitting in standard size avatars and you want something that is more customizable and looks more realistic, I would say go with Dust. Dust is a free software that allows you to create highly customizable avatars that can look super realistic. You can also purchase some add-ons and plugins that give you even more options, and Dust avatars can also be animated and you can change their pose. The downside to Dust is that creating a completely custom avatar takes a lot of time, and sometimes there are some quirks in their posture and in their proportions that are not super great for fitting, but I still think it's a great option. It may not be as fit accurate as Albanon if you're working with standard sizes and standard proportions. I talk more of Dust avatars and I compare them to Albanon avatars in that video I mentioned earlier. I'm going to leave the link, but I believe that Dust is a great option once you learn to use it, especially if you're interested in doing realistic renders and animations. RenderHub is also a marketplace for 3D models, but the way I use it is to get morphs for Dust 3D avatars, so that I can give them a bit more of personality and variety without having to create a whole character from scratch. They do have ready-made avatars in RenderHub, but from what I've seen, most of them have a bit of a more exaggerated proportions, so I haven't used them. I don't think they work well for fitting, but if your goal is to do something a bit more artistic, like for example video game design, something like that, maybe those avatars can work for you. MetaHuman is a bit different and a bit confusing because you don't get an avatar that you can download and use in CLO. What you get is a hyper-realistic avatar that you can use in Unreal Engine. And this is a software that is very widely used in the video game industry, but can also do a lot of things that are in video games, like for example doing complex renders and animations. And why am I mentioning here MetaHuman and Unreal Engine? Because CLO3D has an integration with Unreal and also has some MetaHuman body templates, and that means that you can construct your garment in CLO and pre-drape it in those MetaHuman sample bodies, and then thanks to the CLO integration you can bring that garment into Unreal Engine with your MetaHuman avatar and create a super realistic render there. The whole process is difficult and confusing, and a lot of things can go wrong when switching from one software to another, but especially if you are interested in video games, I think it's good to know that you can create your own garments in CLO and then import them into Unreal. If you're looking to create an exact replica of a person, then there are companies that offer custom body scans. I haven't personally tried this, but I have done some research and I have included some links in the written version of this guide that you can download via the link in the description. And there are also some tutorials that explain how to do a 3D scan yourself using your phone and some apps. So if that works, I think it's a really interesting solution, especially when you want to do something very customized and with the specific measurements and proportions of one particular person. I'm guessing that if you're here, you already know how to work in 3D, but in case you're still starting out, I wanted to share some learning resources that I find valuable. The good news if you are starting out, there are a lot of free tutorials online. The bad thing about free tutorials is that they can give you a very disorganized approach. So that's why I personally prefer to have more structured courses, but that of course depends on your preference. The resources I'm going to share, they are specific to CLO3D because that's the software I use, but I'm sure there will be similar resources for any of the other 3D softwares like Browzwear or Style3D. If I had to start all over again, I would go straight to the official CLO3D channel because they have a lot of excellent and free video tutorials about how to use the software. If you're a complete beginner, I really recommend their Beginner's Guide to CLO playlist because you will find all the basics there, and then they have other playlists focused on other areas of the software that you can start learning once you have the basics. There are also some official CLO3D courses courses in the Udemy platform that I haven't personally tried, but considering the quality of their free tutorials on YouTube, I think they are going to be worth it. Once you have learned the basics, it will be much easier for you to pick up things from other free tutorials or to look for courses that teach you specific skills that you need for your job or for whatever your goal with 3D is. And speaking of paid courses, my friend Trudy at Wayfinder Lingerie has an amazing CLO3D course covering the basics of the 3D side of the software. I really recommend you to check it out, especially if you'd like to do intimate apparel garments. Though I do believe that you could apply everything that you learn on her course in whatever type of garment you're interested in doing. The good thing about paid courses versus free tutorials is that they give you a more structured approach and you skip a lot of the trial and error that come from learning by yourself. Instead, you're learning directly from a person that has been where you are now and knows the most common mistakes and obstacles, and is going to make the learning process much easier and faster for you. Also, with most paid courses, you are able to ask questions if you are stuck, and you have the peace of mind of knowing that you're learning the software from someone who actually uses them in their professional life, so they are going to have a more optimized approach to the workflow and can teach you tips and tricks and ways of working that are not as easily available in free tutorials. I don't want this to be an infomercial, but I do have courses on CLO3D, specifically if you're interested in pattern making and lingerie. My aim with these courses is to help you develop your skills from the ground up, and I have included several practical projects in my courses where you can follow my actual workflow from start to finish. Currently, I have a course on making underwear, and I'm planning to add a couple more courses really soon, so if you are interested in that, I would recommend you to subscribe to my newsletter to be notified when they are out and also to get a little discount code. And finally, here are some other resources that don't fit in any of the other categories, but I still wanted to share with you. If you like animations, Mixamo is the tool for you. Mixamo is a website where you can find a lot of animation presets that you can use with pretty much any avatar and then import that avatar back into CLO. It's super easy to set up, and there are a lot of tutorials explaining how you can go from CLO to Mixamo, Mixamo to CLO. I think it's really fun, especially if you want to do animations with your garments and give a bit more interest to your renders. These two websites have a lot of textures and assets similar to what we saw before with Quixel and Polygon, but I particularly use these two to get HDRIs. HDRIs are images that you can use in CLO or other 3D software like Blender to create a light setup that is very quick and very easy to do. And I use them when I want to do a quick render and I don't want to spend time creating my own light setup. And speaking of Blender, if you don't know it, Blender is an amazing free software that allows you to do hard surface modeling. This is different from CLO. I wouldn't recommend to make clothes in Blender. I think CLO works much better for that. But if you want to create objects like, for example, hardware for your designs or trims or even props to add to your scene, I think Blender is amazing. And you can also import avatars and garments created in CLO and do complex animations and complex renders in Blender because their render engine and the options that they have for customization and animation are much better than CLO. But you have to be mindful that Blender is a huge software and it has quite a steep learning curve. I'm still learning it, I really like it, I'm nowhere near a professional in that, but I think that if you have the time and the interest, it's good to check it out. And the last resource I have for you is this podcast that is hosted by Trudy, the one that had that amazing 3D course that I told you about earlier. And in this podcast, it's not specifically about 3D design, but Trudy interviews a lot of people from the fashion industry, and 3D design appears in a lot of those conversations. Some of Trudy's guests are indeed working in 3D design within the fashion industry, but even the ones that are not, they are super valuable because you can learn more about the fashion industry from a lot of different perspectives. So this was quite a lot. I've done a PDF guide with the links and resources of everything I've mentioned today, and you can download it through the link in the description. But what I want for this guide is to continue growing and evolving with everything that I learned about 3D, but also from the resources that you can recommend me. So if you know a super cool 3D design resource that I haven't mentioned, I would love for you to write that in the comments so we can help each other out, and I will add it into this guide. I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to shut up for now, and I'll see you soon in the next video.